In this video I'll be case swapping this Lenovo M93p computer from this small form factor case to a normal micro ATX PC case. In this case it's Kolink K3 RGB. Normally I would try to fit some smaller size and lower powered GPU inside this small form factor case so that I could preserve the small form factor and not waste the power supply. But with this one I'll be doing a case swap because this one is 4th generation i5 machine, so it could really use some better graphics card than I could put there with this stock power supply. I'll be installing an RX 480, so this 450 watt PSU will do just fine. The backplate on these Lenovos is slightly different than standard, but it can be fitted to any standard case with a little effort in bending the metal brackets holding it in place. Lenovo's CPU fans are not entirely standard. The holes do have the same distance from each other than the standard coolers, but the hole diameters are slightly smaller, and this back plate kinda thing is not standard. You probably could fit custom cooler on this with a little effort, especially if you use some nuts to hold it down, but this i5 will be entirely fine with this stock fan. I took the speaker off from the Lenovo PC and I'll be mounting it in the front panel so that this will still have internal speaker. This case only accepts 80 or 90mm fans as exhaust fans, and especially RGB ones are usually quite difficult to find and they tend to be expensive. So what I do is I buy some CPU cooler which has 3 of these fans and just take the fans off and use something other with that cooler. When the back plate is installed, the motherboard installation is just like normal. The power connector on this motherboard is not a standard 24 pin and requires an adapter to use a standard power supply with this board. I will link down in the description where I got this adapter. I installed a normal budget 240 gig data drive because that was cheapest at the time I ordered it. The USB 3 on this motherboard is not using the standard 19 pin header, and it is some Lenovo's proprietary thing instead. I found somebody talking about an adapter for this on some forum, but that listing on eBay was no longer there and I couldn't find any adapters anywhere, so I ended up just using a PCIe X1 add-in card which has a standard USB 3 19 pin header. I got this RX 480 of Taobao and it had its fans completely broken. One of them didn't spin at all and I just swapped in new fans, so then it worked perfectly. Then I installed front intake fan which was normal 120 millimeter fan, and then I just tried to clean the cables away as much as possible, which is not easiest in these micro ATX cases, especially cheap ones which have had the cable management very much as secondary priority, and there is very little space in the back area. It is very difficult to close the side panel if I'd try to keep all of the excess cables in the back area, so some of them had to be tucked in the HDD tray / expansion bay. Even with much of the excess cables tucked above the HDD, it was really difficult to close the side panel. In addition, the side panel is quite thin metal, so it bends really easily, and I had to take many tries to finally get it properly in place. To cover up some of the green PCB of the motherboard, I used the black plastic piece around the CPU cooler from the M93p. The RGB is working quite weirdly. I did not manage to control it even with the RGB button, but that has probably something to do with my earlier attempts to get it working with an RGB controller, which apparently isn't possible and can damage the RGB control button. To quickly test some games, I downloaded Fortnite and it seems to play very well. Also, Kingdom Come Deliverance ran quite well and was easy to get very playable at 70 FPS by setting the medium settings.